wellnesscouch.com, streaming wellness into your lives.
Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, featuring your hosts Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner. And today we have another masterclass leading the way through play.
I love this topic.
I know you do.
I don't always when I'm in it though. I don't always when I'm stuck in a tree with my kids and I just want them to do what I want.
But you are a master at this, so I'm really looking forward. Yeah, you are. I'm really looking forward to pulling that apart. Before we do, I'd love to remind you to jump on to nourishingthemother.com.au and sign up to join our tribe, where once a week we'll send you an email with everything we've put out in the world with links, so you can pick and choose where you'd love to dive deeper. And occasionally we'll send you a second email that's just like a conversation Bridget and I would have between ourselves, an epiphany, an awakening, a toolkit, just a moment of going, oh my God, this world is incredible and our children are amazing.
Yeah.
So please sign up to join our tribe at nourishingthemother.com.au.
Yes.
Masterclass.
So I'm laughing because I'm just thinking about some of the funny ways that I change around, hard dynamics to find the play.
We have done a masterclass on play before. I'm pretty sure we did, didn't we? And then we had the Marion Rose interview as well.
That was probably
with attachment play.
Maybe 2 years ago now. But it's a gold
So
interview.
definitely go back and have a look at those podcasts as well if this is really speaking to you and it's the next evolution of your parenting.
Yes.
So let's maybe just lay the foundations, Bridget, of what does, because you came up with this title, what does leading the way through play mean to you?
Well, let me paint a picture. So trying to get my kids ready for the, dinner, bath, bed thing, sometimes I meet points of resistance, like most mothers, because ultimately no human, even children, wants to be controlled and they can sense our desire for them to go to bed. So sometimes they put up resistance to that, because, Hugo wants to go and jump on the trampoline way more, or he wants to run around nude, or Sylvie doesn't want to get dressed, or, all of these. And I can remember it as kids. My brother and I used to run around the house nude and avoid getting dressed. It's just fun to do that.
It's so interesting you remember that.
I so remember it. We used to go and hide. hide after the bath. So that, and kids' language is through play. That's how they filter the world. That's what they look for. It's how they express themselves. And so now, I really look for the opportunities to turn that hard stuff, the points where I get annoyed, into lightness and into fun. So for me, leading the way through play into the bath might be, instead of demanding that the kids come in from the trampoline, I run out there and I go, toot toot, the bath train's leaving, toot toot, who's going to be first on the train? And so, my nearly 5-year-old, who would have been like, I'm not getting in the bath, instantly is clamoring to get first dibs on the train. And there are opportunities like that in everything. But what it so often requires for us to do is get ourselves out of our trigger of just wanting them to do what we want into being able to lean into the fun, because that is where we meet them with their own language. And that is where we, transcend the desire to control another person and we meet them in connection. And when people feel connected, and they're much more willing to be cooperative. And it's the same with us as adults, and it's this, it's absolutely how children operate, because for the most part their days tend to be controlled for them. So whenever we can use play as a language to meet them where they are largely a lot more willing to go where we want them to go, and they're also able to use laughter as a way to dissipate some of the anxiety or the frustration or the anger that they might be feeling in their bodies.
I don't know where to go from there.
You are like gold with your ways that you play.
I know, but I'm so lost in your words. I'm like, I can't even think in my own head, because I'm like, and I'm picturing your choo-choo train on the way to bed.
Oh, yeah, it's funny. And I mean, Sylvie will do this before bedtime. She has this game where she wants to push us over, and she'll bring out every play trick in the book to delay bedtime. Because she'll want us to play a push game, and then she'll want us to play horsey rides, and again, it's about that self-check of how much you're willing and able to join them there. But I do think that the more willing and able we are to meet them where they're asking us to meet them, the more that everybody wins. It's really creating that win-win, because we get to shift out of the, controlling kind of vibes or the frustration, or let go of other stress we might be carrying in our bodies from unrelated things.
Yeah.
And to meet them there, and everybody kind of gets a dose of goodness out of it.
Yeah. I think the interesting thing with play, when you're talking about that, is that we talk a lot about recognizing what's our stuff and what's our kids' stuff, and when we're in a trigger, all of the things we can do to bring ourselves back into presence so we can recognize our children and not get lost in our own inner child. But I do think play is vastly an untapped resource for that, because it seems heavy and hard because there's so many layers on play for us. And there's often a lot of shame in play for adults.
Or even play seen as like a reward or seen as something that you do after all the serious stuff is done. You know,
which still has shame attached to the fact that you were playing to begin with.
Yeah, yes.
So
the play's not okay.
Yeah, exactly. And I find that really fascinating because I've got to get in my head how I'm going to say this. What I find really interesting is that sexuality is often the last frontier of play for an adult.
Yeah. You wrote this in a blog recently and I loved it.
Because I've really connected the dots to, and often it leaves the bedroom and ends up only in our fantasy mind where it is covered in shame. And what I find fascinating about that is that it's such this, you know, like the magnificent castle that we all started with. And each time we're told in one or many ways that's not okay about you and that's shameful and that shouldn't be here in this place, and we shut all those doors. And we end up living in this 2-bedroom house when we were always a magnificent castle. It feels to me a lot like that. And what I've noticed about play is the more I defy my own sense of shame that it's not okay to be silly or perceived in a way that, you know, is not held together. The more I play with myself on those edges, the more I realize those doors are blasted open. And there's way more sunlight in my, you know, I'm
castle.
But maybe I'm not a castle yet. Maybe I'm like a mansion, but I'm certainly not a 2-bedroom house anymore.
Yeah. I love that analogy.
Yeah. And for me, I realized that there is mastery in being able to play. And I have actually in this last couple of months been paying a lot of attention to actors and the dramatic folk that I have around me. And I realized there is genius there. There is genius in being able to expand your window of tolerance around emotions by essence of being that person or emotion in that experience.
Playing as a character.
Yeah, exactly. Being able to actually stretch yourself in there and being able to sit with your own sense of sovereignty and safety whilst still exploring these edges of yourself. I actually think there's a huge amount of mastery in there. Long story short, I realized that parenting is also one of those frontiers where there are so many layers of shame and shoulding and conformity that play leaves. And yet when we open up play, everything becomes more effortless.
Yes, it's so true. I love that because it does. It paves the way for more effortless engagements with our children.
But it's hard. Play is actually really hard. And I have like I say this on a double-edged sword because it's hard until you realize it isn't.
Yeah. And I think there's sometimes days where you would rather like scratch your nails down a chalkboard than play, right? Because it just feels so hard to surmount that energy and enthusiasm.
Yes.
So that's where we say it's hard. And particularly if you weren't, like I have no recollection really of my mum playing with me.
No, me neither.
I remember my dad did sometimes, but I don't really remember my mum. And, you know, incidentally, my husband is a freaking genius at play. Like a lot of men tend to be. A lot of the dads tend to be like the fun dad, comes up with all these cool ideas.
Yeah.
But for me, it's a real practice. And I have to think, how could I make this playful? Even when I really don't want to.
Yeah. The interesting thing, though, is as soon as we do that, as soon as we step into it, because even that I don't want to make this playful is still it's still in some essence an underlying belief or trigger that sits there that says,
this is not safe.
It's not safe, or I shouldn't because then they'll never learn.
Yes, or you should just do this.
Yeah. And as soon as we take that extra step and we go, literally the first step in a play, the first step in a dance, the first step in a change in tone in our voice, bang, that heaviness disappears. And what happens is you get a flood of energy. So that energy that you were previously without, energy is infinite when you know its source, right?
Yeah.
And when we tap through, it's the beliefs that actually produce that dampening effect of listlessness. And when we are willing to step beyond our mental belief and we crack that glass ceiling, there's this energy there that wasn't there 5 minutes ago.
And then sometimes, I'll be doing that and I'll be noticing, this thing I resisted so much, I'm actually having so much fun too.
Yeah.
Whereas sometimes I can definitely look at it as a pathway of simply getting, getting the outcome I want. Inadvertently, we can also find immense joy in it when we actually give ourselves fully to it and are willing enough to let go of whatever we were holding on to that was the resistance point before it.
So for me, I actually think that when we're talking about this as a practice, there's two things I think about. One, I think, is fake it till you make it. Be the actor. If you can't bring your whole self right now to the play, be the actor. Be the person. There's a word for the type of play that they do, and I can't for the life of me think of it right now. But there's a word. Is it form acting? Form acting?
I don't know.
Anyway, there's a word for it where they literally think about how you'll put yourself in the shoes of that person. Like, it becomes an act of empathy. Well, if I was a really playful, outrageous soul right now, what would I look like? What would I feel like? What would my tone be like? What would my body be doing? What would my face be doing? And then do that. Because what will happen is your psyche will actually catch on, because physiology will literally lead your psychology. They're an interweaving loop.
Yeah, so it's one or the other. They're always they're always influencing each other.
Yes. So I would say fake it till you make it. And what you'll find is the more you fake it, the more you actually make it.
Yeah.
And you become it.
And it becomes part of your wiring.
Exactly.
Part of it. This can be fun.
Yeah.
I've done this before. My brain recognizes this.
Yes.
This can be fun.
Yes. And the resistance you feel actually lessens, much like, when we're working through our children sleeping through a particular feed or whatever. The first night it's, an hour and a half of crying. The next night it's 45 minutes. The next night it's 20 minutes. And the night out of that they sleep through.
Yeah.
It's much the same when we're looking at this huge resistance, then half that amount, then half that amount again, until one day you go, this is fun.
Yeah. Believe it or not.
Yeah, I know. So I actually think fake it till you make it. And I also think come back to yourself afterwards. Like you and I are really big. We do this a lot in both our aligned parenting, but also with our Loathing to Loving program, is the self-reflection afterwards. We want to give you the tools to separate yourself from your stuff from your child's stuff, to be present in the moment and make a choice that's more congruent with the beliefs that you have and the wants and desires you have for your children. But those painful moments are also there because they are waking you up to opening up your castle. And to let them go simply because you don't feel that anymore is actually cheating yourself out of opening up another door.
And it's also cheating yourself out of an opportunity to love more of yourself for appreciating why they were there in the first place.
Yes.
Because so much of growth can be, oh my God, thank God I'm not that person now.
Yes.
But that is not recognizing all of the wonderful gifts that being that person who you now judge in the past enabled you to become who you are now, enabled you to create relationships or the knowledge or whatever it brought into your life. So this is that next step.
Yeah, it is. So I also think it's worthwhile kind of drawing those breadcrumbs back and going, why was I resistant there? Where did that come from? Blah, blah, blah. And transforming it like we do in our reframe. We have a reframe sheet that we use in Loathing to Loving. So I think it's a double-edged sword there. And I also think you can transform what play looks like. Play doesn't have to be and I'm sorry, Rich, because you're really good at it, but I'm not, this eye-stabbing bloody sitting down and piecing together Lego or playing tea parties till, the hours drag by. Like, play doesn't have to be that.
No.
It can be that, but play can also be a melding of many other things. Play can be dance, and play can be an invitation into silliness, and it can be, let's go build a sand pile together out in the dirt, or it can be, let's build a pile of pillows in the lounge room and run and jump on them. Yes. And play can be, a bit of teasing. Like, really, it becomes this kind of jovial kind of little push and pull, poke and prod. We were doing it with my son, and as kids get older, obviously, and they start to recognise more satirical language, it becomes easier.
Yeah.
But we were doing it even with my son, last night. So we'd had a friend over and the kids were amazing. We had to redo this part of our backyard and they were all just stellar present all day. Like it was amazing. And so we decided that we'd all sit together and we'd have a really fun dinner and we'd have chocolates and stuff like that, which we don't normally have.
Yeah.
And so I think I'd had to go out. So I'd left the chocolate bag and I'd left anyway. My son was going afterwards at the end of the day when we were all hanging out on the bed after bath and whatever. And he's going, well, so not fair because Dad, you came and took the bag of chocolates off me and I only got like 4. I only got 4 and Jade definitely, she had like 10. and Lola, she's practically eaten an entire packet. And my husband and I both smiled and we looked and we went, really? And he goes, yeah. And he had all the reasons. He had all the stories.
Yeah.
Really? Because Jade came and took like 4 in one handful and then she came back and took like another 3 and then the packet was gone. But me, I sat there and just took 1 at a time. And Lola, well, she's clearly just sniped it in and took the whole packet. And we both laughed and we were like, oh, Heath, oh, mate, that's right. And I said to him, you know what? Every time now I'm going to go, whenever you say something, it's not fair because you got 15 chocolates and I got 2. And something else happened. And something, oh, this didn't happen for me today. And I was like, and it's not fair because you got 15 chocolates and I only got 2. Like this. And like you're laughing. We were all hysterically laughing and Heath was laughing. And then something else would happen later on and my husband went, because I only got 2 chocolates and you got 15. It was like this until we were all cracking up laughing.
Oh, that's so good.
And once we cracked up laughing and he's on that path, then we go, you know, you're just reading the world that way, that's not reality, right? and he's like, yeah, all right. But it took play
to get there.
To, one, feel heard, even though we're teasing.
Yeah.
It's a way of still feeling heard because he knows we get what he's saying. And once he's moved through those feelings, we can come to the talking about it and the rational side afterwards, and he's able to completely let that go. And I actually think I used to judge this with men. You might have noticed with men that they bond through banter. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, they absolutely do.
And yet for women, that would almost be like knife stabbing, you know. But for men, there's this way of speaking truth with playfulness. And it allows them the opportunity to feel discomfort but have an out because there's laughing, there's giggling, and there's something else to point at that's not them. So they can, at the same time, I actually think it's genius. I used to think it was deflection, but now I think it's a genius manifestation of play because at the same time as feeling into discomfort and having truths told and felt, there's a way to process the discomfort so you don't have to focus on the discomfort and you can move through it. I actually think it's genius.
It is quite clever. Yeah, I've noticed that too. And I'm like, oh, how do you like turn that into something funny, or how do you like spin that way? And I recognize it's really, and what that allows them to like in terms of transforming energy in their body and transforming emotions, it just seems to be a really great outlet.
Yeah. And I think this about, you know, play in general, that often, you know, they can be hugely painful experiences. I have a couple of friends who are really genius at it, and yet they can turn the really painful experience into a joke. And I used to judge that
so
too.
like black humor.
Yeah. And now I realize, because they can do it for me, you know, and it can be like, I don't know, I can't even think of it. I wish I could think of an example, but something really hideous and be like, oh, don't worry, he's probably going to cheat on you anyway. You know, and you can just laugh like that. You can laugh about it. And it's almost like, because you speak to your worst case scenario and you have an out for releasing that's acceptable and doesn't bring you into so much pain that you can't get yourself out of it, which is, I think, often what I can do is sit so deeply in the reverence of the emotion that it must be felt. That I can sometimes facilitate people too far into that and they hit levels of shame where they can't bring themselves because they've shown so much. They can't come out of it on their own. But humour allows an opportunity to be held, to feel into the darkest dark and yet have a way out. I actually think it's genius.
And it's almost like a pathway of making it that more safer.
So I just think play, you have to stop thinking of it as like this drudgery of, oh my God, having to play Barbies or dress ups or horses, or play can be so many things. And I would say to you, follow the path of joy. It might start as a dance to a song that you love that gets you over the line to play, but it might end in something completely different. And just to follow that inspiration of joy and to watch yourself anytime you're shoulding or saying, oh, I shouldn't do that. I should do this. Oh, that's probably not okay. And just to go with the fun, like just follow that flow, because I think when you start, it's also a practice for yourself, because don't forget, whatever happens in our day happens in our night. So, and what I mean by that is I often think with women, you can't just say, well, my bedroom's boring sexually or, with intimacy. But is your day boring too? Because you can't go, well, I'll just bring the fun into this slice of life, because whatever is in one is in all. So you want more fun, play, invitation, flirtatiousness, feelings of fluttery, joyous butterflies. Bring it into your day. This is when I think that melding of mother being an asexual thing really messes with your head, because parenting by its very virtue is a practice in sensuality, because we are called and have opportunity to practice in nearly every moment of the day how to be more sensual, how to feel more. That's all sensuality is.
It's true, isn't it?
Using your senses.
Yeah.
And making safe your body, trusting those feelings and following those feelings like a river flowing through the Amazon, being willing to follow that river, not knowing what's around the corner, not knowing what is behind that tree, but just trusting and building trust and building safety around trusting those feelings, which then flow into your relationship in your bedroom. You are the same everywhere, not in one spot. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And that's not to take away from what we see in terms of, values manifestation, where clearly, in values you might be super empowered in one area and not in the other. The vitality with which you bring, though, when you are buzzing, it carries across everywhere. Overflows into the 7 areas of life, as opposed to values, yes. So it's again, although we can talk about it in terms of a values clash, that we can think that one takes away from the other, but in essence they actually flow. But this is also this process of filling up your own cup, is when you fill up your own cup, you have an overflowing state and it flows into the other areas without you consciously having to project it into those areas. But it starts with making safe what has previously not been safe for you. And if your desire to do it in your parenting is not high enough, then I would pick the pain point. Is it in your relationship? Is it in your sex life? Is it in your work life? I don't know. Is it in your finances? Is there not enough play there? And I would say, if you want that bad enough here, start here, because this is a way of linking those values and getting yourself to step up in your day-to-day, if that's what your day-to-day is, that will flow over into that. It wouldn't matter if you were a stay-at-home mum or you were a full-time working mum. If you were wanting more play, then it still starts in whatever you spend your day doing. It's still a practice. Is what I think about that in terms of the values. So bringing it back to playful parenting masterclasses, where do you want to go? We've kind of talked about philosophy and theory underpinning it. We just want to take a moment to talk to you about our aligned parenting program, which has very much been created from both myself and Bridget, from our hearts and our minds, and our years of parenting wisdom, which is very much built upon a foundation of every conscious parenting book that's ever been written, every in-person experience that could possibly have manifested. Yeah, absolutely. And we realised we still got to this point where we had no understanding or deeper insight beyond our children's needs, and we needed to feel into our own bodies and our own minds and our own sense of desire and want in this world as much as within our relationship. And we didn't know where to go beyond children's needs. And it's a relationship like no other, that parent-child dynamic. It's not something that just comes naturally if we seek to both raise children with strong emotional intelligence and grow as women and mothers and partners and wives.
So what we've done is opened our Aligned Parenting program up for lifetime access.
Yeah, so that's $197 in one payment, or you can have it in 3 payments of $66. And what that means is that you get instant access to all of our course material, and you'll also go into our private Facebook group with our tribe and another group where we will facilitate bi-monthly live webinars, and we'll also have facilitation with you after those webinars to hash out any conscious parenting dynamic that you find yourself in and where you want to really upskill.
And that's for lifetime. So we really invite you to jump into Aligned Parenting programming with us, where we really work on creating deeper insight and greater connection within your world.
I remember years ago when I read Larry Cohen's book, Playful Parenting, which is awesome. And in fact, I went to a session with him when Sylvie was a newborn, and it added more wisdom. But I remember years ago when I first read that book, there were some things that he shared, and even I share with my mum, and my mum was like, "You can't play with that. Like, there's things you just can't play. Sometimes you just have to do things." And I really sat with that and took on that belief, and kind of that resonated with me at the time. But now as I've played through more stuff with my children, I start to really question, I'm pretty sure there's probably a way to find play through just about anything. And I wondered, Jules, with your more years of parenting wisdom and more children, whether you have some perspectives of them, some things that might have been perceived as hard to play through, or perhaps inappropriate to play through, and how you have led the way with play as opposed to gone perhaps with more traditional parenting methods?
I'm trying to think about scenarios in which you would think, no, you can't play with that. You just have to do it. And I probably just get a bit dramatic with my language. So I can think of a few times with my son in particular, because he can just get really stormy and he just like plants his feet. Like, you cannot make that kid do something if he doesn't want to do it. He's one of those kids. And because otherwise, honestly, it's just way harder the other way and it just goes very badly.
Yeah.
And so there's been times he gets really frustrated with himself. He does very much have a perfectionist kind of aspect to him. So when it's not perfect, or it hasn't been done perfectly, or it's not going perfectly, he hits himself a lot. Not physically, I mean emotionally hits these edges. And I can think of this one time, I think he was helping me get shopping bags in from the car, and one of the handles had broken, and he didn't want to do it to start off with, so he's grumpy as he's doing it. And one of the handles had broken, and which of course is resonant of whatever's happened in his day anyway. It's not the thing, is it?
Yeah.
Anyway, he's grumpy. He's taking the shopping in. One of the bags breaks and the stuff out of it goes everywhere. And he's like, that's it. I could see it flick that switch, and he's like gone into cranky land, and I can remember him stomping his foot and being like, I'm not doing this, and da-da-da-da-da. And I could have like gone, just pick it up and take it inside, because that is what I need you to do right now. But I didn't. I followed him into his bedroom with a couple of bags of shopping because he was having a tantrum in his bedroom. And I made sure he looked at me, and I threw the bags on the ground, just kind of dropped them. And I started picking shit out of them and throwing it. It's like, this stupid pasta. And I threw it and it hit at the wall. And I hate this celery. And I threw the celery. And I was like, and this jam. Oh, like this. And I threw it until I had like gone through a whole bag. And then he was watching me like, and I could see he'd flipped out of his like cranky land and watching me like with this kind of smirk on his face. Yeah. And so I kind of like kicked a bag over towards him and looked at him like, what are you going to do? You know? And he's like, but he's gone, I hate this packet. And I was like, I know. Until we'd like demolished 3 bags of shopping around his bedroom. And at that point I was like, kind of rubbed him, because don't forget, vibration and body movement moves emotion too. And as soon as I can touch him, his connection will flow. So I kind of did the vibrations for him. So I kind of like grabbed him and kind of was shake rubbing him, going, doesn't it feel so much better to get this out? You know, like this. And then at the end of that, he was like smiling, his big smile. And he was like, yeah. I was like, let's just pick this shit up. And he goes, yeah, fine. And so he picked it up and we moved through it. And I can think about that with homework. You know, this problem's really annoying. And at times I've like slammed a book and gone, this is just too hard. And I grab this book and go, I hate this book and maths is just rubbish, like this or whatever, because you shouldn't play through that, right?
Yeah.
And yet it will get to this point where you can just get that out, and then I'm like, now how are we going to bring the pleasure back? And he'll come up with ways to do that.
That's really cool.
Or for my daughter as well. I'm trying to think of other examples where you shouldn't play through things.
And you shouldn't. In fact, it feels your mind says you shouldn't, because it's like you're asking yourself to behave in the complete opposite way that your logic wants to behave, or that perhaps your patterning wants you to behave. Yeah. Because you are asking yourself to bring, instead of control has to be done this way, this is how we do it, you just have to get on with it, whatever we were told, basically, or whatever your teachers might have told you. You're then actually having to completely do a 180-degree flip, 360-degree flip, and go, let's actually play through and ham up the very thing that we are resisting doing and turning it completely around. And it is such a different language and way to transform our reality than perhaps what we've ever been taught.
I just thought of another example. Do you want to hear it?
Yeah, I want to hear it.
So things like chores. So my kids do have to make their own beds. They hate doing their doona covers because it's like the world's hardest thing in the whole world to do a doona cover, like put it back in. And so I hit that resistance all the time. And so when it comes to things like chores where you shouldn't play through them, and I really need them to do these things, I again put on my actor's hat and I ham it up. So I'll be like, this is too hard. And I'll, put myself inside the gym, or I'll throw myself down on the ground and have a tantrum, or I'll be like, you can just look after this because I can't do it anymore, or whatever the case may be. Or dinner, you don't need to eat, I'm not cooking. I don't know, stuff like that. I just think you can find a way just to be ridiculous.
Yeah.
And the more ridiculous you are, the more you play with those edges, the more you can kind of meet their polar opposite. It's almost like a seesaw balance.
Yeah.
The deeper they've gone, the funnier or more loose I'll get. And, I do swear sometimes, and now we can laugh at the swearing too, because again, we've got parameters and understanding around
when it's appropriate, when it's not appropriate.
Yeah. And I just think you can absolutely play doesn't have to be sit down and play tea parties. Play can be so many things.
What about when, because I think certainly when you're learning this and you're learning where your children's boundaries are, what about if you're trying to play but they're actually getting deeper into perhaps some level of trauma? And where do you go when the play hasn't worked or it hasn't given you the desired outcome?
I just keep playing. So I can give you an example of that. I can think of where my daughter, I can't remember exactly what had happened. I was home with my, I don't think I'd had Gwen yet, so it must have been my 3 kids. Or she was sleeping. And something had happened. Maybe I'd said no. Often it's no to a play date, because I've said to you before, her highest value is in relationships and community. So for her, every time she doesn't have an opportunity to be with her friends and be social, it creates a huge emotional trigger for her. And she gets really super grumpy and irritating, I'm going to say. Anyway, we were home and something happened. It hadn't gone her way, and she was like slumpy land. She was arms crossed, face set, sitting on the couch like, you're not going to make me do anything and I hate you right now. And, like her whole body language was just shut down. And I tried sort of normal ways of, I get that's really hard. I get you don't want to do that, blah, 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 blah. And I was getting absolutely nowhere. And so then I was like, do you want to dance? Do you want to dance with somebody? Like this. And she was still in no man's land. And so I just kept going. And so I cranked up the music. And so I started doing dramatic dancing in front of her and a bit of, actor's face and, a bit of vogue.
Maybe some spirit fingers.
Yeah, spirit fingers. Yeah, exactly. And I would pick songs that had lyrics that I could kind of sing to her.
Oh, yeah.
I can't even think what they would be. I'll do anything for love. I don't know, stupid songs. Yeah. And then, by virtue of holding that energy, kids gravitate to it. So now I've got my other 2 kids dancing with me and we're all going crazy in the lounge room. She's still in slumpy land. And so then I got out the magic lasso. I can't remember
you got the what? What is
magic lasso? Lasso?
Oh, like a lasso. Yeah.
Lasso, invisible. And so I started creating this lasso and going, this lasso, you cannot fight it, Jade. This has the power of just bringing out your inner goddess. And I'm going to throw it out to you and it's going to hook you and you're in the family vibe. And you're going to, hamming it up like this as I'm, scratching my voice. Hang on. And I threw that lasso out to her and she still stayed in grumpy.
Oh, no.
And I was
Your lasso.
And I was like, oh. And so there's part of me that's going, oh, my God, I'm running out of ideas
and
here.
I feel so rejected.
I know. And so I just kept going. I was like, this time I'm going to get it. But it's kind of like I was thinking when they were babies and we used to, when they were super little, and we used to, fight over them in inverted commas where, we'd be playing tug of war with them. And, no, you can't have them because she's mine. And I love her more and I want her more. And, this push and pull that is such a fantastic game for kids, particularly when they're dealing with separation with parents and maybe daycare and childcare, maybe other siblings, they're trying to find that they still have a place. It's almost like a version of that. So I just love you so much. And this time I'm going to get you. And this time you cannot resist it. Or like when you were doing, we would do, there's no way you can escape me. And I would grab them and hold on to them enough that they could use their resistance, but they would always escape me magically by virtue of being more powerful or more clever or more whatever. They would somehow magically escape my, grasp and hold on them. When they were little, it's almost like a version of that, only now they're older. You can't quite do it in that way. And so it's kind of like, this time I'm going to get you. This time you won't resist me. What about the hip wiggle? Can you resist that? I don't know. I just keep going. And sooner or later, the play and the intention of focused love is enough that they do come back. And so I would say you just keep playing because it's still, they're in the bog, they're in the abyss and they're walking through the Sahara Desert and they're going to get to the oasis. It's not that it's never going to happen because they just keep walking, they will.
How much are you fighting your own resistance and your own inner feelings of rejection and woundedness and desire to run away sometimes when you're doing that?
Yeah, and I think, though, being that I've been parenting for so long, I've transformed a lot of that from the younger days of playing with that. But certainly as my kids get older and more teenage-esque, the more I'm still hitting those layers because they hit new layers of my personal stories of rejection.
Because that is often, we as mothers will sometimes find anything else. That's like that thing like when you used to be at uni and you had to do an assignment you didn't really want to do and you never normally cared about cleaning the house, but all of a sudden cleaning the house is really important. Sometimes we find the same things around our children.
Around play, yeah.
And around play, around wanting to avoid the uncomfortable feelings that they're bringing us because there's something in that for us. And so being able to stay grounded and making it that safe for us to go into at the same time as bringing the play is a real practice. And, it's something that you're definitely further down the path on than I am, and I still face a lot, every day sometimes. But I definitely see it as the path forward, and play is such a rich way to move both yourself and your child into greater connection and fun.
Yeah, I do think it's the same. I think laughter play is the same as tears play, I'm going to say, because you still have to have boundary and edges for yourself and recognise if you're going too far for you. Knowing that it is a practice, so the more you widen your own window of tolerance, the further you'll be able to go and the longer you'll be able to hold that space. Yeah. So depending on how much work I'd done around my own stories, I probably couldn't have held that lasso with Jade for as long as I did. Because I probably would have stopped at, oh, well, you're still in a funk after the song. Are you kidding? I've pulled out all that stuff and you're still in a funk?
Yeah.
I can't help you right now.
Yeah, sorry, you're on your own kind of thing.
Yeah. And I think I've probably gone through layers of that.
Yeah.
But because I keep persisting on my edges of resistance, I keep building and expanding my window of tolerance, and then I can show up more in those moments that count. But I also think you've got to have reverence for yourself, and you cannot expect yourself to parent a way that you cannot give yourself. So if I can't continue to show up for myself when it hurts, or to continue to massage my edges for play when I'm feeling shut down. I can't expect myself, like with our sexuality and our playfulness, I can't say I want it here but not here because it's everywhere.
And that's why I love also the leap you can make too from how you show up in your relationship and where you're willing to go to unsafe places in your mind, in your relationship, by bringing playfulness and by being willing to potentially be rejected in your relationship, is also conditioning yourself for more of that heart opening and transformation with your children, isn't it?
Oh, I totally think that. I mean, I think all of those areas of life are actually really interwoven. Like I know we talk about empowerment and disempowerment, and the life purpose is to empower the 7 areas, but there is a fluidity between them and a connection point. And as you grow and expand in one area, that tends to flow over into the others as well, or you learn more about those areas that were previously had resistance in them, that you realise you now have a toolkit that applies to that area of life, even though they're seemingly separate. So, I just think also have compassion for yourself. If you are hitting those edges and you are personally really struggling, don't keep pushing yourself and going, I must show up for my child, I must show up for my child, I must show up for my child, because that is a surefire recipe to get further and further away from yourself.
Yeah, yeah.
And I know that sounds counterproductive in conscious parenting, but the more that we push ourselves beyond what we are unconsciously trying to reveal to ourselves, the more we're practicing not listening to ourselves, and the harder it is to authentically listen to our children. Like it is a catch-22.
Yeah. So it's really being able to listen to your children means also really being able to listen to yourself. They are like a pair.
So that's a lot of talking, and after all of my playfulness, my voice is a bit scratchy. So, what would you like to leave with, Bridge?
I would really, we've said it earlier, but I would really love that if you're wanting to upskill around the play, or really dive in with other mothers who are wanting to do the same, and really expand your toolkit around play and just that real dynamic between your child and yourself. Really invite you to join our Aligned Parenting program because it's such a great opportunity to look at not only the conscious parenting stuff, but also your own family dynamic and what's going on and what the children are reflecting of that for you, and how they're helping to ease you into your next level of growth, which is just so rich when we start to see our children in that way.
It's the part I love the most, actually, dynamics and what they're actually trying to reveal to us, because our world is always speaking to us. We just often don't have the recipe for understanding it.
Exactly.
So that's what we hope we provide in Aligned Parenting.
Yes.
Thank you so much for listening. Golly gosh, we just appreciate it so much that we have this group of women that we get to speak about the things that light our world up with, who also lights their world up. Like we actually have a huge amount of just heartfget gratitude for that, don't we?
Absolutely.
So thank you so much for tuning in. And if there are podcasts that resonate with you, please share them with your tribe. Get them out in the world, because I think the more women we have putting back into their own cup in a really conscious way, the more this next generation will just change the world.
Yeah.
So please connect with us on nourishingthemother.com.au, Nourishing the Mother on Facebook and Instagram. Please keep talking to us if there's podcasts you would like us to do.
Yes.
Or even if you have people that you think would really fit our vibe, that are really interesting that we could interview. We'd love to hear from you as well. If there's stuff that's really resonating in your world and has really kind of blown it apart for you, we love those stories. So please share your ahas.
Just make our week. When we get those
they
ones.
do. Yeah. So please share those moments, because it's just honestly, we just love it. We cannot believe that we, have created this tribe in which we all get to show up together.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really cool.
And so to connect with you, Jules,
is thepleasurenutritionist.com, and you, Bridge?
suburbansandcastles.com.
And your next movie?
It is a couple of different ones coming up, actually. So we've got a film called Swim Team in Melbourne, and I've also got a film called The Pathological Optimist, maybe, if we don't get shut down. So that's happening in Melbourne and Geelong too. So, yes, if you...
Suburban Sandcastles tickets.
Yes.
And you've got to nourish the mother to rock the family.
And we will see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives. Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.